Well, hello there. This is obviously a different setting. Kind of a funny story, but kind of not, because it literally happened like less than 10 minutes ago. I was doing my normal setup. I had everything ready. I had my chair. I had the lighting ready. I had my mic. I had my camera adjusted onto my camera stands. And I mean, this is something that just had been happening over time, and I've been bending the stand to adjust the camera to the correct level so it could be sort of straight with me. That's probably all the wrong terminology, but I think you guys know what I'm trying to say. And yeah, I was bending it this time and it snapped. So it's now I can kind of laugh at it. 10 minutes ago I was pretty pissed off, but it's okay now because I have this temporary setup. I'll try to look for another stand sometime in the future. But in the meantime, I'm here to talk about this new album, Wasteland by Brent Faiyaz. So let's get started. So Brent Faiyaz is not an artist that I am too familiar with. I would say from what I've heard, I think it's all right. You know, I haven't heard a lot by him. I've liked some songs I've heard from him. I've heard some stuff he's been featured on. So I think I've heard just enough to kind of form an opinion. I think he's fine. From what I understand, he's more of an R&B kind of guy, neo soul, that kind of stuff. And that's cool. Those are genres that I do get some enjoyment out of. And so with this album, I was just curious to see what he would have to say, how his production would be, if there would be any kind of story or any kind of interesting narrative within the record. And I think that his name is Christopher in real life, if you're wondering why I'm saying Chris. I think Chris is definitely trying to say something with this album. He is trying to recall, I don't know if it's something that happened with him personally, but there is clearly a relationship that he is sort of meditating on throughout this album, talking about different phases of it. I found the opening track, Villain's Theme, to be an interesting way to start off the record. It's not labeled as an interlude, but it pretty much is an interlude. We hear these different voices throughout the song. They're all pretty much talking about, you know, how much they have to work throughout their lives, and basically like they just can't really enjoy life as much as they can for what it is because they're just working all the time. It's all about working, all about being on that grind. And it was cool hearing these people talking. Sometimes you just hear an individual person talking. A couple moments there's these different voices overlapping, kind of creating this chaotic nature of a track. And hearing these ominous chords being played in the background, I thought made for an appropriate sound for a song called Villain's Theme. However, I'm not too crazy about the next track, Loose Change, as excuse me, I felt like this was just a little bit too straightforward in its nature from a lyrical standpoint. Musically as well, the instrumental was kind of underwhelming, but I will say that there are some very pretty strings that we hear. Gravity is the next track. This was a single released before the album, and I liked this song a good amount. I know it's not produced by Tyler, the Creator, but it does kind of sound like his production, but I'll give props to DJ Dahi here. There are some very addictive guitar lines being played. It's a nice song, one of the brighter sounding moments on the album, and I like Tyler's feature. I do just wish it was a lot longer. It's like he just came in for 10 seconds and then left. It's like Ozzy Osbourne on Take What You Want, where he like just sings the chorus and that's it, just a few lines, and then he basically just left the track. The next track, Hear Your Heart, is a proper interlude, labeled as an interlude, and it's extremely short, but I think it is pleasant and it just does a good job of moving to the next stage of the album, where we hear the first skits on this project. And these skits, I think, are to some people a very vital part of this album. I will admit though, I don't really see the tie with the other tracks that are surrounding them throughout this project, especially since it does seem to sort of go from this sort of toxic nature, argumentative state with the first skit, where we hear what sounds like Chris and his partner, who's pregnant, sort of just arguing, and she's saying like he's not paying enough attention to her. He, as the track says, seems to have a bit of an ego to himself. The second skit on the album is called Oblivion, and this appears to call back to a time in the past when they were more happy. It sounds like they're in some sort of cab and they're drinking, they're just having a good time. And then the penultimate track on the album is the last skit. It's called Wake Up Call, which is an incredibly dark skit where he calls his partner and she is crying, she's a mess, and I'll just say it, she threatens to kill herself and he chases after her, and very, very heavy-handed stuff. And I think that these skits would have felt more properly implemented if the rest of the album, the sound of it, the feel of it, fit this movement of emotions going from dark and angry and upset to a little bit happier and brighter in the middle, and then once again down a dark hole, I guess, towards the end of the album. And it didn't really feel that way personally for me. I felt like it was kind of a missed opportunity there with those skits, because I did find them to be very interesting, especially Wake Up Call. I mean, man, that really like perked me up. I was on the edge of my seat listening to that one. To me, All Mine is kind of another okay cut. Brent's performance, his vocals are fine. The instrumental is all right. It's sort of this mix of R&B, this synth-induced trap instrumental, which is kind of cool, but nothing really new. I have a feeling he listens to Frank Ocean. I have a feeling with this track that he likes Frank Ocean and considers him an influence. Just throwing that out there. And really throughout this whole album, you can see that Brent really wears his influences on his sleeves. Like I said, Frank Ocean, I can hear some of his sound on some of these tracks. I heard a little bit of Rex Orange County at certain moments, especially with how much strings are utilized throughout this record. Of course, Tyler, the Creator, who's featured on this album, I can hear a little bit of influence from him as well, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with at all. I mean, another artist that comes to mind that kind of does that is Travis Scott. You could say he takes from Kanye, from Cudi, from A$AP Rocky, and does still manage to kind of create his own sound and his own aesthetic to a lot of his music. And then we go to Price of Fame, which was the last single leading up to the album, which I did listen to when it came out, and I thought it was interesting, but it didn't really hold my interest for the whole running time, as it is a bit lengthy. I gotta say though, I do enjoy it quite a bit more in the context of the album. I think just from a sonic standpoint, it's an absolute journey. The opening instrumental in the beginning has, I don't really know how to describe it, but it has sort of a tribal feel to it. Like, it sounds like it could have been off with the Black Panther soundtrack. After a couple minutes, this speeds up a little bit, and then right at the midway point, we have another switch up, a complete beat change actually, that goes into more of an acoustic direction. I really like how the song transitioned into this part of it, and I also thought that Brent's vocals were a big standout in this second half. And yeah, I was just really digging the overall sound of this track. It's one of those where I really don't care that much about what the lyrics are, just because musically I'm really digging it. I'm liking the plucky little strings that we hear on the song Ghetto Gatsby, as well as the bass line that comes in super smooth. However, I do think a downside of this track is the Alicia Keys feature. It feels kind of awkward. She is kind of rapping actually, and I mean her performance isn't bad, but I thought it felt a little bit out of place with the song, and it also just kind of ends with her feature, and I think it would have worked better if it had gone back to Brent's part of the song. But for it to just end like that pretty abruptly, I thought kind of left it off on a semi-bad note. However, we get some more really good, impressive production with the next track, Wasting Time. Also a single leading up to the album, produced by the Neptunes, which I could tell right away even without seeing that they were involved with this track. Very bass heavy. The strings sound absolutely gorgeous. And I think that Drake's feature is actually pretty adequately done. He's just kind of being Drake, it's not really, there aren't any lines that are like, whoa, like his pen game is once again just pretty mediocre. Although there is this pretty awful string of lines in Drake's verse where he says, "The boy is back, I never turned my back. I just laughed him, so now all that they see is my back. Say that, then Maybach Benz with me in the back." I mean, slap in the face, more like slap in the back. Rolling Stone is a highlight off the album for me. I'm really liking the psychedelic sounds of the guitars in this one. Just overall, there's this very spacey atmosphere to it. Once again, pretty reminiscent of Frank Ocean. And I like what Brent is going for here with the lyrics, as he is pretty much comparing himself and his actions to a rolling stone. Like, you know, a stone that's rolling just keeps tumbling over and over, and he just keeps making the same mistakes over and over again, doing these dumb things over and over again. And like in the chorus where he says, "I'm sorry in advance if I let you down," you know, he's very self-aware of that. Like, yeah, he's gonna keep doing this dumb shit and keep making these mistakes. So I liked the approach he took with this track. We do, however, hit another kind of rough patch with the next track, FYTB. I felt that the production on this one was really lacking. It just feels very muddy. There are these like muted horns. I don't know why they had that sound to them. And on top of that, I do think that the Junie feature feels incredibly out of place with the song. Dead Man Walking is another one that is kind of just okay. I do think that there are some pretty cool pounding drum sounds in this one, and then at the end it also has a change similar to In Price of Fame, where it speeds up a little bit, and so that was a nice way, I think, to close out the track. We get some more very self-aware Brent with the next track, Addictions, where, I mean, literally the opening lines, maybe it's the love, the drugs, the weed, the pussy, maybe it's all of the above, maybe I don't need a hug, maybe I'm just fucked up. I like the lo-fi sound of the drums on this one. Also, it's not labeled as a feature, but Trey Amani's verse, I thought, was quite tastefully done, and it did actually kind of carry on with the approach that Brent was taking on this track. And I don't really have a whole lot to say about the next two tracks, Role Model and Jackie Brown. They were both just kind of bland to me, and I thought, okay, whatever, I don't really need to revisit these again. And I honestly don't really have a whole lot to say about the track Bad Luck as well. I liked it. I enjoyed the song. There's a piano that's very prominent in this instrumental that I thought was very nice, and I do just like how it carries on and transitions into the final skit. And then after that, we do get the final song, the anthemic track that is Angel, which fittingly has this very springy sounding keyboard, because I've throughout this album was thinking that his voice kind of reminds me of Stevie Wonder, and then here he comes with these keys that sounds like they're off of Songs on the Key of Life. Cool way to close out the album. So yeah, I mean, overall, this album I thought had some great highlights, numerous moments that I was very impressed with. I would say most of the production I thought was really solid, but even that at times I thought was a little bit weak and underwhelming. You know, like I said earlier, I do think that the skits just aren't as well utilized as they could be because of the way that the album is sequenced. I do think that maybe the order of the track listing could have been switched up a little bit. Overall, I would say the album was fine. For me, on Wasteland, I'm feeling a C+. And I mean, it was kind of cool to hear a contemporary R&B album, because I don't avoid R&B, but typically like newer music, just with the artists that I follow, I tend to gravitate more towards hip-hop, towards rock, towards pop music. I think those three genres are probably the most that I listen to. And other than the Silk Sonic record from last year, I don't know if there's an album I've reviewed that is mainly fit under the R&B genre. I mean, you could make an argument for The Weeknd's Dawn FM earlier this year. Maybe Adele's 30, I don't know, but it's either way, I liked that I listened to this and that I'm reviewing it and talking about it, sort of broadening my horizons of the kind of music that I talk about on this channel. I was not in love with this album. I do think that it could have been a lot better if you just changed a few things, but overall I thought it was okay. I'm kind of tired of talking right now. My mouth is pretty dry, so I'll just close out the video here. Of course, thank you all for watching this review, for putting up with this different setup I have, and I'll see you later. Peace out.